Thank you everybody for coming to the session here. We've been to a couple sessions today and everything's been great so far, so I just hope we can kind of live up to that for you. By way of introduction, I'm Matt Cochero, the VP of Engineering at JOC Group. And this is Tom Lee. He's our Senior Business Intelligence Analyst. He calls himself a data doodler. So what we want to do today is take you through a little bit of the way that we're changing the way the maritime industry looks at data, how they ingest data, how they make decisions off of data, and what they do with it. But I know the JOC Group is a small company. I know most of you guys probably don't know who we are. I did see a couple companies in there. Does your tag say Hanjin? No, it's Haynes. Sorry. So, all right, I saw fewer than I thought I did. But I know that there are a couple companies here that probably recognize the name JOC Group. Probably most don't. So I just want to take through a little bit of what our data is, how we've traditionally worked with our data, how our customers have traditionally worked with our data, and then how we're changing that. And then we'll get into some of the dashboards that we've built and the different ways that we're using it. So by a little bit of background here for JOC Group. We have a couple different brands. Primarily it's Piers, which is our trade and maritime data. So everybody as they came in from the airport passed by a couple of the ports that are out here. All those containers that are on the ports are the data that we measure. So that's everything that's in those containers, the amount that's in it, where it's coming from, who it's going to, who signed for it. That's the data that we collect. And we collect that at every port across the United States for both imports and exports. It's the most comprehensive database of this sort. We have a couple competitors out there, but we have all the trade data. They don't all have the same amount that we do, so we are the most subscribed to data platform in this business. We have the JOC.com, which is 50% data, 50% editorial content. So a lot of people, when they recognize the name JOC, they think of the Journal of Commerce, which has been around since 18-something or other, 1845 or so. It still lives on today in JOC.com, and we've always been the most trusted news source for the maritime industry. So what we've been trying to do at JOC Group is transition away from kind of the typical download of spreadsheets, here's your raw data, you can just work with it, do whatever you want with it, into what we call intelligence at a glance. So our customers can go in, they can manipulate data a little bit, but it's already decision ready. They don't have to work with the data. We do that for them, and we present it to them in a very easy, ingestible format. So in the past, like I said, it's always been downloaded. We would have spreadsheets, huge spreadsheets that just get downloaded from our database. Clients would work with it, put it in pivot tables, send it around. I mean, we could stand here all day. I could tell you about all the problems that caused, data quality issues because clients would change things in the spreadsheets. It would go from from us to one person to 50 people, and we have a little diagram on this in a second. So the data a lot of people would have their hands on the data before it actually reached our end user. That was a problem for us. We wanted to bring our tools directly to the end user. The other thing is when it was going through one person, it wasn't immediately available to everybody. So it would go to one person, that person would sit with it, work with it, do whatever they had to do with it, send out these reports, and that would take a week, 2 weeks, depending on how good the person was working with our data. And everybody would come back to us and say, why are you guys so slow? And we'd say, well, we're not actually slow. We provided you data 2 weeks ago, but now we're getting the person in trouble who's our primary point of contact. That's not good. Right, so this is kind of what it used to look like. Don't worry too much about the details. What you need to take from this slide is that it was really confusing. So we basically would provide all this data to trade analysts. Those trade analysts would get requests from across the entire company. Those requests come from a lot of times a salesperson because what those salespeople want to see is who's moving cargo, right? Because they want to go, if you're a salesperson for a carrier, you want to see who's moving that cargo so you can call them up and say, hey, whatever that rate is that carrier is giving you, I'll give you a better rate or whatever it is. They have different business initiatives, but they need to see who those leads are. It could go all the way to an executive and say, what's my market share in the Trans-Pacific trade lane? Right, so big trade lane from Asia to the West Coast. I need to know where I'm performing in that. I need to know whether to invest more in it or pull ships out of that. So what we've been doing with Tableau is we've recreated our product. And this is what I was talking about before, where we want to have our end users interact directly with our database. We know that we're not going to get a sales rep running into a meeting, downloading data, putting it into a pivot table, doing analysis and figuring it out by him or herself. It's just not going to happen. As much as we would all want our salespeople to be like that, we know that they're not going to behave like that. It's not fast enough. It's not on their fingertips. Now what we're doing is we give them something that they could print to a PDF, put it into a presentation, and actually talk about it with a customer. Or better yet, pull it up on their tablet, when they're meeting with a customer and actually show them, hey, I saw I lost your trade here, what's going on? And we'll talk about that in a minute. It's also supposed to be a lot neater. See how we organized it? It's nice. Right? So we structured this a couple different ways, and we're going to talk about both these products. JOC.com, which is, like I said, our news site. So that's where we're actually presenting a lot of data, and we're writing a lot of editorial content about it. And what we call MP2. So the primary peers product was My Peers. We just shortened it, made it MP2. People seem to love that name. So the basic way that we structured this is we have a big data cluster store. We're actually using Amazon Redshift, which was presented in the keynote this morning. So we have a very large data store. And then we use different data extracts for both JOC.com and for MP2. So we kind of partition them off so that we don't have resource contention. And then from there, each client can go in and they can see these different extracts. Why is this so important? Because in the past, My Peers has always been something that's been downloaded once a week. It had been refreshed once a week, so the data was a little old, right? So if we were behind on our data, if our data was lagging, it was even older than that. So you could have to wait, 1, 2, 3 weeks to get data, whereas now we can refresh that as often as we want, or as often as the customer wants. So we get live data on the sites.
So,
yeah, we're going to switch to a demo now.
Yeah. So a couple weeks ago, there's been a lot going on in the news with Russia and Europe and North America with all these trade embargoes, everything like this then. And kind of to make things a little bit more tangible with our data and what it is Reuters came out with an article, highlighting that Russia is actually the second biggest meat purchaser from us, chicken and primarily. And yeah, it goes on to say, they really love our chicken. And of course, the chicken's not moving in airplanes. It's frozen. This would be really expensive. So we thought about it, and then, yeah, it's actually moving containers in refrigerated cargo then. And what this allows us to do, if we look at it, is take our data and really bring it in and tie it into a political situation then. So what does actually the raw data of peers look like?
So this is an actual example that we had up on our website. So I think it was our highest traffic story ever. It was 3-4 weeks ago now?
Yeah.
I don't remember when it was. It did really well on our website, performed really well. And it's something that Tom and I had spoken about on like a Friday morning and posted it just to see what would happen. And then, by like Saturday, which is normally a really low traffic time, we just had our best performing article in the history of our site. So it's like, oh wow, people actually like this. This is pretty cool.
Yeah. This is what data looks like. From our database, it's just a spreadsheet. It's really hard to see anything. We took this, we ingested it into Tableau, and what we wanted to present to our readers is really what the data has to say. And here we just have the visualization that we published, and we can see here, well, where's the chicken going or coming from and moving to? So we're looking here at U.S. exports of chicken to Russia, and here you can see the port coverage that we have. In blue, we can see the poultry exports and everything else that's not poultry then. Really quickly to the reader, they can identify where the big markets of poultry are. So we can see here out of the Gulf, Mobile is actually the biggest, and New Orleans has a pretty good share too. Charleston has some too then. Also in our data, our shippers, our readers, they want to know which carriers are going to be impacted. So actually this is, Russia says, we're not taking chicken anymore. We don't want your chicken. We're not going to accept it. There's going to be boxes on the water with this chicken. In real time, it's not like, oh, we can't move this anymore. There's actually chicken moving right now on the water that has no home. That's very sad. So here we can really
Orphan
see
chicken.
Yeah, these sad chickens. They have nowhere to go. We can see here which shipping lines, who's operating the boats, are moving the chicken, who's going to be really impacted. So we can see Maersk is going to be the number one. They have about 25% share of their container exports to Russia as chicken. And we can actually see which shippers are going to be impacted too then. And this is what we put up. We put a little editorial around it. But I think what's really nice about this too is there's a lot of benefit internally to our team. And that we can actually empower our editors, even with them interacting with the dashboard. So here we can just see, well, Mobile, Alabama was actually really interesting to us. We saw that it had most of the chicken. And from an editorial perspective, now I can see, oh, one, the port's going to be affected. This is a lot of volume that they can't move anymore. What are they going to do with all this chicken? Two, there has to be an exit strategy for the actual shipping line because now, well, their boat's not as full. And when their boat's not as full, they're not making money. So we can have an interview with them then. And then also with the shippers here locally, where are they going to take this chicken now then? What is their strategy? Where are they going to sell this chicken? And so here, based on the data, our editors have 3 more stories to tell.
Yeah, so something that's really interesting. Can you go back to the tab, Tom, where it was just a spreadsheet? A lot of our customers we're trying to run this analysis. We could see it, right? So we could see usage, we could see what data they're pulling down, we could have a pretty good guess as to what they're doing. And then they stopped, right? So we put this on the website, and we posted this story and said, here it is, everybody, sent it to a couple key contacts at our customers, and then all this data download stuff stopped. And we did it for them, which is exactly what we want to do. That's the business we're in. That's what we want to be doing. So it's a real life example for something that most people, even outside of the maritime industry, had heard of, the Russian chicken ban, that we could kind of bring to you guys to relate to.
Yeah.
So you want to go to the next?
Yeah. So here we go. You just zoom out so it fits.
So now we're going to show MP2. So that was an example of something that we just posted on JOC.com. Now we're going to talk about dashboards for how we're bringing business intelligence to our customers. So we do a lot of different business intelligence stuff internally, where we look at a lot of different numbers, a lot of different data. And I know a lot of people in this room do that. And one of the things that we want to talk about here is how are we making this public? How are we actually sending this to our customers for them to interact with? And like that diagram said, how do we get them to interact directly with our database? And this is it.
Yeah. So I'm actually one of the trade analysts that came over to do this. So this was actually my day-to-day, taking data, running data. And what I always found is that you would run a report, and it would generate more questions. And then you have to run another report, and then you have to query more data. But at the end, there's actually a really nice story that you can tell through these if you can kind of have this central view of it. And that's kind of what MP2 is geared as. So here, every time a client logs in, they'll come up to this landing page. And every carrier, I think most businesses, they care about market share. How big are they in any market? And that's what this is really aimed at doing. So here, we're going to take a quick story through Chilean lines. So just to look at the dashboard here, we summarize export volume here across a whole coast then. We can see the total market and what their presence is here in market share there. I know it's a little small. And then here we can see all our coverage internationally. So we have all our trade lanes broken out. So we can see here East Coast to East Coast South America. In this case, I have some annotations here that will actually look at Gulf to West Coast South America. We have some development here. So right now we see the whole year picture, our a year and a half worth of data. But it's always nice to see the trends broken out here so we can see the market development then and also how the market share is progressing. So actually what I saw here was that they had a peak in market share from Gulf exports to the west coast of South America. But as of June, there's been a steady decline then. So I think from any executive, it's a really important thing to ask their organization, what's going on here? Why are we losing business? How can we get it back? And this trickles down through the organization in terms of action plans and how to generate this business. And then just down at the bottom, we have some top carrier rankings, who are their top competitions, what commodity groups are moving. So here we can see in this trade lane, chemicals and resins are really big. And what are the top port pairs to countries then?
And one of the reasons our customers love this is because they can go in, they can look at this. Like Tom said, this is geared toward an executive. It's geared toward a higher level person in the company. But somebody can log in who's on the front lines and see this before maybe the executive did, right? So they can start to answer those questions before they get asked. And that's why people are starting to really like that, because they don't feel like they're behind the ball anymore with, this report gets produced once a month, gets sent out, and then all the questions come. Everybody knows that anxious feeling you get when you're talking about data, right? But now they can get ahead of that. So they can already have their answers. They already have a game plan for what they're trying to do, and it makes it for a lot nicer work environment for them.
Yeah. So, if we go with this idea that, we're losing market share in this trade lane, what might the next step be in a carrier? You're going to talk to your trade lane managers who's looking over the whole trade, and they're going to have to come up with an action plan. How can I get this business back? So another analytic we call the carrier fact sheet, and this is a really good place for a trade manager to find out where business is declining. Let's see if it loads. All right. So here we just summarize again. We kind of like to keep a little bit of consistency with the visualization. So we can see here by load port how the market's developing by month and also the market share development. So really quick from anyone, they can see what markets are they involved in. Same thing, which port they're ultimately moving towards and which commodities they're moving across then. And this becomes pretty interactive that you can use each of these as a filter on another field. So after some drilling down and playing around with it, looking for declining trends, here we arrived at a conclusion that, it was Houston exports moving to Peru and Ecuador that were really driving this market share decline here. You can see that New Orleans is doing fine. We're actually trending up in market share. But here across the board, it's declining then. and it's actually across chemicals and resins. And just at the bottom, since you have these different views of the graph, as you continue to filter, we just give an overall market. So you're actually carving out a market, and then you're actually seeing the overall picture at the bottom then. And at this point, it's the trade manager's job to talk to sales. Hey, something's going on here. Can you try to figure it out? And of course, they need to go to their customers and figure out what happened. And this brings us actually now towards where we really switch audiences. So now we've had the executive level, we've had the trade management level, and now we're going to get to the sales leads. And this is where salespeople can get really empowered to go and get business then. So we have this declining market share. We've kind of determined the part of the market where it's going down. It's Houston exports, moving to Ecuador and Peru. And this is sales leads then. Just at a glance, account executives, they need to be in front of sales. It's not really their job, I don't think, to do analysis on raw data. So we want to give them a lot of upfront information. Which customers can they call on? Where are they moving to? And they can have these discussions then. So we applied the same filters just here on the top routes and the top commodities to see which customers were moving this business then, or who's not moving it anymore then. So you can see here we've just filtered it out. We have this selected. And we see here really quick that the top customer is Shintech. They're moving quite a lot of volume. They're actually the biggest Gulf exporter of chemicals and resins then. And we can see here really quick for this market and this customer now. So we've now actually put in the customer that, we were trending up as Chilean lines, but now all of a sudden, as of March, market share has gone through the floor. I think the really important part here is that their volume is still consistent then. So it's not like they've just stopped moving cargo. It's still out there. It's still somewhere for them to get then. And I think really the question here is, well, if you're still moving it, the cargo is still moving to Peru and Ecuador, how are you getting there? It probably has to be with a different carrier then. And this is where we can start tying in insights from the other dashboards then. So
this is where we've actually gotten into the hands of the salespeople at these carriers. And they love it because they don't have to wait for somebody to get them that report. And what our success criteria here has been, before where we've had 1, 2, 3, up to probably 5 users of peers data. Now we want to have 100 users at a carrier, or 150 users at a carrier. And there's some people from JOC Group in the back who know those stats off the top of their head better than I do. But it's all about building that user base. So we didn't want to just have one person or 5 people. We wanted to have everybody there. We wanted them to be addicted to it. So it's something that we really help them with, a tool that they can use every day, and they do use every day. And we're seeing that happen.
So to bring back some of the previous insight, if we actually went back to the landing page, we could actually see the top competitors in this trade lane then. So Med Shipping's really big, Seaboard Marine, and Hamburg Süd are the top 3 carriers above Chilean lines then. What we did with MP2 is actually we came up with a parameter, focus carrier parameter. And what this does is let the user sit in any carrier seat then. All the market share calculations will float around the company that they select then. What does this allow us to do? Using the focus carrier, we can change our point of view then. So we know this business is still moving, but it's moving with someone else. I can use this top carrier list to see who the competition is, and it was actually pretty quick. I went to Med Shipping, the #1 shipping guy carrier, and I can see here, it's no coincidence that their market share is trending up. What does this allow sales to do? They can have a really directed conversation with the customer. I saw in this month you were moving with us. What happened? Why are you moving with them? Is it price related? Is it some kind of gap in service? Anything like this? And they can take it to the customer and they can show them pretty upfront. You're moving with this guy now. What can I do to get it back? And this is something, at least from my time in the maritime industry, it was really hard to do. I mean, because they're still using Excel predominantly.
Yeah. This is all obviously web-based. So they log in, they see it, and they're like, oh, this is perfect. A lot of the people that are using this tool use Tableau. So they use it internally, and they're doing a lot of analysis with it, but they're not putting together stuff like this with peers data because they're a little scared of the scope of it. So there's a ton of data out there. We have these prefab dashboards that we could just give to them. Go ahead.
So how did you share, in the case of the editorial, the article, was it embedded in the website, or was it a link to the server website?
It was embedded in the website. So our JOC.com website is a Drupal site, and it's basically an iframe. It's not really an iframe. This content in, so we can write editorial around it. It's a Drupal content type. I don't know if you're familiar with Drupal at all. Yeah.
I'm pulling it up. I have to log in.
He's got to log in. So we can write a little editorial content on the top of it or the bottom of it and basically embed it anywhere on the page.
would load. Here we go. Yeah, so this is the actual article then. We had just...
I want to zoom out a little, Tom.
We had the little blurb, explaining there was some financial data that we were able to pull in based on the U.S. government website. And then here we just have the actual visualization then, where readers can go in and interact with the graph. If they see New Orleans as interesting, they can go and focus here then. Yeah.
So the data isn't particularly sensitive, showing the shipping, right, the market share?
So no, I mean, this is all data that we would consider that we'd be able to report on. So we could report on anything that's in the peers data because it is publicly available data. You just have to pay for it. But so it's not hidden, and we're not basically taking business away from peers because we're not showing the same level of detail here that we do in our peers database.
Yeah, and we got rid of a lot of the functionality of Tableau actually with downloading the data, viewing the background data, anything like this. So it's pretty restricted here what you can see then.
Yeah, and this is just one example. We've used it a couple different times on the site for a couple different stories. We don't only use peers data with Tableau, obviously. I mean, JOC.com reports on the entire logistics industry. So there's all different data sources that we use out there, different freight rate data, a bunch of different things that we'll ingest and basically pop into a story like this. Any other dashboards you want? So we're both from New Jersey, and we speak really fast. When we practiced this, we had slowed down. It took us an hour. Now, I guess with all the people in the room and it's a little warm up here, it took us 20 minutes. So any questions?
What is your data source?
The peers data source?
Yeah.
U.S. Customs.
So how accurate is that data? If you're talking about using this as a sales tool,
Mm-hmm.
so you were showing a line. So if you have multiple bill of ladings coming from multiple carriers, how are you rolling that information up? Or like Procter & Gamble could be Procter & Gamble Inc.,
Mm-hmm.
Procter & Gamble Incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
What are you guys doing to obtain the data before it reaches this?
So that's a pretty interesting question. I mean, that we could talk probably for 3 or 4 hours on that. We have a bunch of different data processing tools that we use, and that all happens kind of on the back end. So that happens as it goes into our data store. So as we're ingesting the data, we do things with it. For the company names, we actually use MapReduce. So we're doing a lot of different. We create maps basically, put like company names next to each other, take the probability that they're the same company names, and throw out a bunch of different tokens that say Inc. or company or whatever, like a lot of common words that are in company names, and then match them together. There's a bunch of different, we do a similar thing with commodities. So when we get the commodity description on the bill of lading is a huge text blob, right? It just has just a lot of text. You can basically the carriers can literally write anything in there, or whoever files the bill. It's not necessarily the carrier, but we take that, we parse it out, we separate that into different commodities, and we create each one as a record in our database. So there's a lot that goes on the back end before we even get it into Tableau or into a visualization. Yes?
You mentioned very early on that before Tableau you were using spreadsheets and it was a really complicated process. Can you talk a little bit about any obstacles that you faced in getting everybody shipped over to using Tableau and getting rid of spreadsheets altogether?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge... So there's still a need for spreadsheets. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, people will still pull down data to see the record level detail. And there's like 72 or 73 different fields that are on a bill of lading. So they'll pull that down to see all those fields together, especially if it's a bill that they filed or they want to see how their customer filed a bill or whatever. So they'll still pull that down. The way that we've done it with a user, where there was a lot of fear from our power users. We had those 1 to 5 users that were pulling all our data down and sending it around in the organization. There's a fear that, hey, you're going to take my job with this. Why am I going to help you get to my sales staff when I could just keep being employed in doing this? We've turned them into power users, basically. So we train them first on how to use this. We've trained them how to pull data down, get different insights in here, how to manipulate the dashboards, and then send those around. So when there is a tough question, there is something difficult, that's normally the person that they go to. We don't want that expertise to be solely on us. I mean, if they need a different dashboard created or something, we can do that. But we wanted that person to be in-house at the carrier, so in-house at our customers who can manipulate our own dashboards and try to figure that out. And it's worked really well. Yeah. Sure. Go ahead.
Are you working with
Mhm.
versus they would have more recent data of their own to measure the markets and blend those two data sets together to do a customized solution for them?
So we do some forecasting on our own that we send to customers. We have a couple different statistical forecasts. We use ARIMA modeling a lot that we'll actually give to some of our customers. Our customers will take, so some of our customers, I see that you work for Crowley, right? So some of our customers, the data lags a little bit more than others. So Crowley, for instance, is the Puerto Rican trade. And Latin America, I'm specifically the Puerto Rican trade lags a little bit more because of the way that we get that data. Any of the data that we source through U.S. Customs, which is U.S. to anywhere to the U.S., not U.S. to U.S. For imports, we're faster than anybody because we get it directly from Customs. We process it within a couple hours and we get it back. Exports, they do have the data a little faster than we do. So a lot of times they'll forecast out what they see. They'll look at the trends that we have for different carriers leading up to that month or that week or whatever time slice they're looking at, and then they'll just kind of extrapolate that forward. We haven't incorporated any of that into our data set. It's something that we could do. It wouldn't be very difficult to do. It's just a matter of getting the carriers on the same schedule where they're sending us data and we get it back to them. Anything else? Nope. You want to put up the slide about the survey?
Yeah.
Survey slide. All right, so survey slide. If you guys could go into the Tableau app and rate us, let us know how we did. I'm sorry I went fast, but I think I gave you guys a half hour back, so, Go get a coffee. Thank you.
Thank you.